Welcome everybody to Reserve Seating. Very excited to have our special returning guest, Dana Buckler from the Dana Buckler Show, back with us. It's been a little while. Last time you were here with us, I think, was for our show in January, where it was like our favorite movie from the year we turned 23.
That's right.
So we got it. We got to do that again in
Yeah.
2024.
Yeah.
But today we are doing the long promised Tubi Halloween episode. And we each had the criteria of just pick a horror movie we want to watch on Tubi, and then we'll discuss it. So I will start off. I picked Blood Feast, Herschel Gordon Lewis's early feature, commonly known as the first splatter movie. It was from 1963. It had more gore than any movie of its time, any movie really for a long time afterwards. He's got a definite cult following. He's a director that I think is a predecessor of certain people who maybe did what he did better, like a John Waters or a David Lynch, even. I used to like Blood Feast. I saw The Wizard of Gore in a theater during a horror movie marathon and had a great time with it. It was really funny. It was like gratuitous violence, befuddled cops, stilted acting. And then I watched Blood Feast shortly thereafter, I think at home by myself. And I was still on kind of the wavelength of Herschel Gordon Lewis. Then cut to maybe 10, 12, 13 years later, I'm revisiting Blood Feast. I'm like, this is my suggestion. I haven't seen this in a while. It's an hour and 7 minutes. What could go wrong? And I just had a completely different experience with it. The violence really bothered me. Especially, there's a scene early on where I think it's like the second victim, and the police are talking to the mother of the victim. And the mother has this detail that's so specific. It's, I just made a dress and she's never going to wear this dress. And whatever humor was intended completely left the room, never to return. And I know that Herschel Gordon Lewis has his own cult following. I was amongst one of his fans, and I just don't know. Maybe you just change as you grow up. But I had a really tough time with this one.
Okay, well, first of all, Adam, Rob, thank you for having me back. I love being on reserve seating. It's one of my favorite shows on YouTube. So I just want to get that out of the way and say thank you guys. When this list was presented to me, all
Yeah.
right, I won't say what Rob's film was, but when Adam mentioned his film, I this is one of those gaps in my, movie memory. Like I had not seen this movie before. And I didn't do any research. This was a blind watch. It was all
Mm-hmm.
right. And like you said, Adam, I caught that it was only an hour and 7 minutes. I'm like, oh, this is going to be a breeze. Now, I hosted a screening of Psycho last week, and a good part of my introduction was talking about the Hays Code and all the do's and don'ts of sort of that time period of cinema. Psycho's 1960, so I see this movie called Blood Feast, which is 1963. Again, I don't know that it's considered the first splatter horror film. So
Mm-hmm.
when it opens up, my mind is not prepared for what's about to happen.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, look, it's an homage to the shower scene in Psycho. Oh, this is, and as the woman's starting to take her clothes off, I'm saying, well, this is really risque for 1963, and the rating system doesn't come out until 68. This is oh, wait a second, and totally punched me in the gut. I was not
Yeah.
ready for what I was seeing on screen, and I just had to put myself in audience's shoes in 1963 because you thought the shower sequence was something else in
Mm-hmm.
Psycho. From that to the spoiler alert to the lady getting scalped on the beach, like this movie was unsettling.
I was mildly prepared for it just because I know Lewis, I know his work, and we'll continue to talk about how we feel about the movie overall. I have respect for the workmanlike quality of the movie, the fact that he's trying to make something exploitative. In the same way I appreciate like the first Friday the 13th or something, where it's like this is a ripoff. We're ripping off something that's more popular. We're doing our best to do it in a cheap way. There's a lot of unsettling, creative, subversive, gross, nasty stuff in this, and I can celebrate that. I don't think it's particularly well put together. I don't think it's particularly well acted. But
Yeah.
it's a fun watch for Scary Movie Month.
Like, it's interesting because I just watched and became a fan of the Terrifier franchise last year, and Herschel Gordon Lewis sort of prepared me for the violence in the Terrifier movies, where I'm like, it's so over the top gory. There's no like realism to it. It's very circus, it's performative, it's not meant to be taken seriously. And I've met Damien Leone from the Terrifier franchise and many of the people in it. Herschel Gordon Lewis was at a horror convention in Chicago one year locally, and he seemed like a really nice old man. And it sort of declaws the movies, I guess, in a way where like you're maybe kind of dreading the subject matter, and then you see the creatives are like, it's just a goof and stuff, and it kind of makes it more accessible. But I don't know. Yeah, it's I think if the movie were maybe more serious minded in its intent, it would justify the attitude more. Because it's not even like I'm seeing the blood effects, and it's like it's bothering me because it just looks like red paint with like hamburger. But I think that he's just got such kind of a blasé attitude towards violence explicitly towards women that, you know, whatever his intent was or wasn't, it just makes me uncomfortable to sit in my living room to look at it.
I will say that, and I'm going to come across sounding very hypocritical once we get into the movie that I'm going to introduce for
Yeah.
for this episode. But you mentioned the Terrifier and the Terrifier 2. Not movies that I can bring myself to watch. For some reason,
Mm.
if the gore is not done in a serious satirical way, like the movie that I'm going to be introducing,
Yeah.
I have a hard time with splatter films. It's really something that I actively avoid, and
Yeah.
I can't bring myself to watch The Terrifier 2. I've heard the stories. I've heard you guys talk about it on F This Movie.
Yeah. Not to go off on too big of a tangent, but I think the thing that Terrifier does not have this, and this is why I'm not the biggest fan of the first movie, and I kind of lump it more into Blood Feast camp. But Terrifier 2 gives you explicitly a female protagonist to root for, and she can fight back, and she doesn't lose at the end of the movie. Sorry, spoilers for Terrifier 2. She emerges on top, at least temporarily, and it keeps you invested because you're just like, okay, this guy's beyond the pale, but like we've got somebody on our side. And Blood Feast doesn't really give you that. So, and it's got really no interest in exploring that. So,
I will say this, and I
yeah.
agree with everything you guys are saying. I do
Yeah.
think that there is a nature of amateurism here. There is a naked exploitative attitude with this movie where I agree with what you're saying, but like they're not on the level where they're understanding the sexual subtext of what they're doing in terms of the violence against women. I don't think they're on. I think they're just trying to make something exploitative and grody that they can put out there and make money. And I don't.
Yeah.
I'm just what I'm trying to say with that is like I don't think there was sinister intent there. You know what I mean? I don't think there's any. I don't think they were talented enough craftsmen to even be able to approach that. So in that way, I can kind of forgive it, but it's not something I'm going to go back and watch again.
Yeah. And Herschel Gordon Lewis has said basically, like, I'm not here to make a good movie. I'm here to make money.
That's
Like, basically, yeah, I'm paraphrasing. So
very clear.
he knew the quickest way to a buck for him to be able to sell a movie and everything like that. There are amateur movies of the early 60s that are horror related, like Carnival of Souls, that have a lot of art to them.
Mhm.
So I would suggest one of those, unless you're a big gore hound, which
Absolutely.
there's nothing wrong with, then maybe you'll like Blood Feast. All right, so Dana, what is your pick?
Yeah, so again, like when you initially told me what the idea was going to be, I just want to start by saying that I really started to embrace Tubi about 4 or 5 months ago because I'm a huge fan of, movies from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and Tubi has an amazing array of those films, which a lot of the call the modern streaming services do not. Um, so when I was kind of just scanning through the list, this one caught my eye, and I had seen this once before, and I gave it a rewatch before I said I was going to add this to the list.
Mhm.
And that is a satire from 2010 called Tucker and Dale versus Evil. Now, why is it a satire? Well, it's a horror movie that subverts your expectations. It's your what I would initially say was your standard Cabin in the Woods. Uh,
Mhm.
Not to say that there wasn't a movie that came out 1 year later called Cabin in the Woods, which also subverts your expectations. But Tucker and Dale, I think, is a funnier movie, and I find it to be a little bit more enjoying than Cabin in the Woods, which is not a knock on that movie. I do like it, but this one I think is a lot better. It stars Alan Tudyk and Tyler Labine as two affable, charismatic hillbillies who just want to go to their new cabin that they bought in the woods, and they are, through a series of random and by chance events, are mistaken for your typical horror movie cliche hillbilly killers. And I don't want to say anything more than that because I'm hoping that people that are watching this that haven't seen it will give this movie a shot. But I will say that the charisma and the affability of the two main characters is worth a watch by itself, just for those two guys alone. On top of it, I mentioned earlier that I don't do really well with like splatter horror. This movie is gory,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but it's gory. I don't know. There's something I can't put my finger on why when it's done tongue in cheek.
It's the intent. Yeah.
It's the intent. It's the intent, Rob. Thank you. You're right. I've never been able to explore why it is. It's truly the intent. When the intent is satire, for some reason, I have no problem with it. And there is some really over the top stuff that happens in this movie that God, I hate to say it, I'm laughing at.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
it's just great. And I'm sure the two of you have seen this movie. I loved it. I had a great time and rewatched it again today with my girlfriend who had never seen it, and she had a blast with it.
I saw this once at a movie marathon that they used to have in Chicago, where every weekend, like once a month, they would do like these horror triple features at like one of these old like theaters that Patrick and JB and I would joke it always felt like a wrecking ball was going to come through the wall at any moment. So this was like movie number one or number two of one of those evenings, and it played like gangbusters with the horror crowd. And I was excited to revisit it because I haven't seen it since then, but I was nervous that it was like one of those almost like a festival bump type of situations. And once I came back down to earth, I would feel differently. And I might have liked it even more this time because I think that it's so impressive that the movie essentially is a one joke movie.
Yes.
And the joke works every time. Like whether it's the writing or the staging or the performances, it's always funny. These two guys, Tudyk and Labine, are so disarmingly supportive of each other and nice, and just they don't throw in the face like we're not hillbillies, you're misrepresenting us. It's just that like you're misunderstanding where we're coming from, and we have a lot more in common than like you think that we do and stuff like that. And it's also funny just watching like alpha frat douches like get their comeuppance. It's just very enjoyable. I think Katrina Bowden is sort of like a secret sauce to this whole movie. Like I think that they found gold with her chemistry with Tyler Labine. It makes it this sweet romance. Also, I can't say enough good things about it. It's like one of the best horror comedies of the 2000s.
We talked about the movie being one note, but one of the things I love most about it is what it does in the back half, which I guess I won't spoil for folks who, I want to make sure, Dana said you don't want to spoil anything. So I don't want to spoil anything either, but the Chad character, the way that the movie then flips expectations in terms of the character dynamics and does something incredibly wild and hysterical with the alpha frat, pop collar douchebag,
Yeah.
is just such a wonderful, it's such a wonderful way to do a horror comedy that, again, JB always talks about this idea of a good satire is the thing and also making fun of the thing. It's and this is a wonderful example of that, where it's a good horror movie, it's a good, good characters, and it's also doing the thing where it inverts, subverts, and I think really celebrates the characters who are, thanks to movies like Texas Chainsaw and everything, tend to get kind of a bad rap in these films. I have so much fun with Katrina Bowden. I know her mostly from 30 Rock because I'm a huge 30 Rock guy, where she plays Suri, who's brilliant in super, she snipes. She's really, really funny in small doses on that show. And I think that her chemistry with Tyler Labine, as you said, is great.
Yeah, it's a really good hangout movie too. It's like we'll get to the plot and we'll get to the set pieces, but it's like the stuff that and all that stuff works, but it's like the stuff in between is what you discover after the first viewing is like that's the great stuff in this movie.
And then one other thing that I really want to give this movie credit for is we live in a world, especially now, where this story can be told through a PG-13 lens. And I think they could probably find a way to make that happen. But this movie does not hold back. It embraces its R rating to right to the cusp, right to the end, right to the edge. And I love that about this film is, again, this script gets produced in 2020, 2021, 22, 23. It's going to be a PG-13 movie. And I love that. I've loved that in 2010, you could make this the way you wanted to make it.
So, and then we wrap up with 2013's Oculus, the second movie directed by Mike Flanagan, who has since become, one of the top voices in the horror genre. And it's interesting going back to seeing one of his earlier movies after like how prolific he's become and the heights of Dr. Sleep, for example.
I was just looking around for stuff I hadn't seen that I wanted to check off the list. Honestly, it was just something, and I'd never seen Oculus. I'm a huge fan of the Doctor Sleep director's cut. I'm a fan of Flanagan in general. He does make horror movies that are kind of my speed. We'll talk more about that in a minute, I guess. But I had never seen Oculus before, and I'm a huge Karen Gillan fan, and I was excited to see it. I love Pete Sackhoff, so it was right up my alley. So I was just watching this for the first time, picked it because I'd never seen it, and was just kind of rolling the dice. And I was very much into this movie. This is a Rob type horror movie. This is a real plotty semiotic emotional roller coaster kind of thing with all kinds of Mr. X and things like that. And not to again spoil too much of the movie. Reminds me a ton of I've been reading Stephen King. There's a Stephen King story about a haunted mirror. I will look it up and put it up on the screen because I can't remember the name of it right now. But that this I read over the summer that it reminded me a ton of. But I love. I mentioned to you guys in text, Karen Gillan being stern and assertive and talking down to me is like my perfect date night. Like I just like, please just say mean things to me. But aside from that, I think it was really cool. I like the parallel nature of the timeline there. I like that it takes you a little while to get used to what it's doing. I love movies that teach you how to watch them, and have patience with their audience, that their audience is going to understand how to watch it. And this movie does that in the first 10, 15 minutes where it's kind of bouncing around and it lets you gradually figure out what's going on, which really comes in handy when it gets to the end. Again, not to spoil anything, where the lines between the timelines become less apparent and you start to see them kind of seep into each other. And I think it's a really cool movie about like along those lines. I think it's a cool movie about like emotional memory, the way sometimes we misremember or forget, so on and so forth. So I really enjoyed this one. I don't know anything about it from your guys' perspective. I'm not sure. Dana, have you seen the movie before?
This was another first time watch for me. When I vaguely remember when this film came out, and I looked and it looked like it made 45, 50 million at the box office, which is, again, for a horror movie, it didn't have a big budget. I'm surprised we didn't get 5 more of these films. Here's the thing. I'm introduced to Mike Flanagan. You mentioned it, Dr. Sleep, director's cut. I didn't see the theatrical version of Dr. Sleep. I saw the director's cut. That was my introduction to Mike Flanagan, and I loved that movie. So when Oculus was put on this list and I saw it was directed by Flanagan, I said, okay, I'm in. Sold. Don't need to watch a trailer. I am in. I found the plot to be, if I'm being honest, a little complex. It took me a minute to figure out we are dealing with a 10-year time gap that is being played out at the same time. So all of that kind of fell into place for me. I found it to be smart and most importantly, engaging.
Hmm.
I was in. I was in. It's a film that I genuinely really feel like I need to watch a second time now that I've got a much better understanding of sort of the pacing and the plot, and more importantly, the structure of the film. But overall, I enjoyed it. And again, I'll just reiterate with its box office performance, which I think was decent by considering its budget. I'm surprised we didn't get more of this.
One of the movies he made, if not directly after this, it was like the second movie after Oculus, was Ouija Origin of Evil, which is a movie I should really revisit this month because it's amazing. And the first Ouija is not good. And the fact that he just kind of came in, it just like confirmed his talents. Like I knew that from seeing Oculus, I'm like, this is like a new interesting voice in horror. But it's like once I saw Ouija Origin of Evil, where I'm like, if he could take like this Blumhouse screen gems like afterthought type of movie and elevate it to art, it's like he can't do. There's nothing he can't do if he sets it out. I saw Oculus in theaters. I really dug it. I think it works really well as as you guys kind of alluded to, as a mystery, just as much as a horror movie. It sort of crescendos in the same way that like an Inception does,
Mm.
where it's just kind of frantic, like accelerated editing towards the end. And I think it works to really good effect. I really enjoy the movie. I think the performances are almost uniformly great. I struggle a little bit in the first act with Karen Gillan's talking to camera because it's sort of just like you said, somebody scolding you for 30 minutes, which is not necessarily my cup of tea with her. I like her. I like the movie. But you know, I gotta save that finish for Rob. I gotta pass it off.
I gotta eat too.
Um, and also like I don't mean to be picking on him, but like imagine maybe an actor not Brenton Thwaites in that part.
Yeah, sure.
Maybe it would be just a little punch, like a little pinch better. But it's a good movie, and it's cool to see the evolution of Mike Flanagan from this point to where he is now.
To that point, I do want to say just quickly, I'm very curious about Mike Flanagan because I like Mike Flanagan's movie. I like his TV series less. He's the Netflix king now, and I understand why, and I like his atmosphere. I understand all that. I do think, and thinking, I think Adam, I think this is something you said once about M. Night Shyamalan, where M. Night Shyamalan is always better when his back is against the wall, when he feels like he needs to like prove something. You know, if he's got too much studio runway, he gets a little self-indulgent. He gets, you know, and whereas if he when he comes back and does something like a Split or Old or something like that, he's just like just unadulterated weird Shyamalan.
Mhm.
This Flanagan and almost and the Doctor Sleep Flanagan too. I think that's the Flanagan I prefer. I would like to see him do fewer stretched out 10 episode kind of long-winded sort of moody atmospheric Netflix series. I would like to see him make more like fire in the pants kind of movies like this where it's a little bit more just energy.
I wonder what he would do next feature wise, because Doctor Sleep
Yeah.
was his last movie, and even though we all agree it's like an amazing movie, it was a bomb, and like maybe that kind of had him go into like a comfort zone of a Netflix where he doesn't have to worry about that. So I'm curious, like if that back against the wall thing will be whenever he elects to do his
Do a
next
feature again.
feature film. Yeah. So I want to reiterate what Rob said. This is a celebration of Tubi. Do you guys have any other movies like maybe in your queue or like any ones that you stumbled upon, you know, when you were searching Tubi where you're like, you know, that's a good Halloween movie. It's something I would recommend, or even just like stuff in November that's not horror that like you're ready to watch that's also on Tubi.
Evil Dead 2 is on Tubi right now, which is incredible. Uh, Night of the Living Dead in color. I don't know if I agree with that, but I love Night of the Living Dead.
If
So,
you find the black and white one, try that.
but
Night
here's
of the
here's
Living Dead 1990 in color is
that's the
good.
Tom Savini directed one, correct?
It's
I believe.
yeah, which is good. Yeah.
So couple that I noticed that are in here. Okay, here's all you need to know. The Frighteners is on Tubi right now, and so is They Live and 28 Weeks Later. Those are all, in my book, great movies that are on Tubi right now.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to May, Lucky McKee's May, which is a movie that I already did a podcast episode on. Otherwise, it would have been like a slam dunk choice for this. And then Dr. Giggles, and there's May. And I'm a big fan of early 90s Universal horror movies, even when they're not, home runs, and Dr. Giggles falls in that camp. It's just good horror cheese. Dana, thanks so much for being with us on Tubi Halloween. Love having you here.
Guys, thank you for
And we
having
hope
me.
that you guys found some good recommendations on Tubi. If you've come across anything that you want to recommend to us on Tubi or to the YouTube audience, feel free to leave a comment. We would love to know those movies.
Yep.
And we'll be back to wrap up Scary Movie Month next week. It's a little bittersweet.
Before we do, Dana, you want to tell everybody website, handle, where we can find you?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So my podcast is The Dana Buckler Show, available wherever podcasts are found. I'm most active on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Dana Buckler Show. So please feel free to reach out to me that way. And guys, once again, thank you so much for having me on. I love talking to you guys.
We love having you on, buddy. We're huge fans of the show.
Yeah,
thank you.
Huge fans of your show. So until next time.
These seats are versing evil. They are having a blood feast. They are oculizing.
And they're reserved.
They're reserved.